Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a very special episode of the Card Subject to Change podcast. If you're a wrestling fan and you've been following wrestling news today, you know about the passing of the legendary, the iconic Terry Funk at the age of 79. Funk left a lasting impression on the wrestling business, that's for sure. That's why we wanted to come on here and talk about it tonight. I am Never Wrong Nick Bull. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we have the Wizard CZ joining the Card Subject Change discussion, and we have our good friend, wrestling savant, Tim Regal, who joined us on short notice tonight. Tim, thanks for joining us on such a sad situation.
You know, I'm always happy to come on with you guys. Obviously, I wish it were under better circumstances, but I'm glad that you guys thought to include me to pay tribute to a guy who I think should be in the greatest of all time conversation more than he is, and that is the legendary Terry Funk.
Without a doubt, there are a lot of people eulogizing today, as there's a picture of the Funker right there, the late great Funker. A lot of people eulogizing how he is the greatest wrestler of all time. I think what's great about Terry, and I'm young, we're about the same age, but Terry Funk is the one who kind of introduced me to what hardcore wrestling was. Such an influential part of Extreme Championship Wrestling. I don't think ECW gets off the ground or had the fame it did or fame it would if it wasn't for Terry Funk having his handprints, his fingerprints all over some very important early matches in that company. He was a part of the first pay-per-view that ECW ever had back in '97, Barely Legal. That was their first ever pay-per-view. Funk, Stevie Richards, and Sandman in the main event. The winner of that got a title shot at Raven. Of course, you know, Funk wins that and goes on to take on Raven at a later date. But Terry Funk, to me, embodied what hardcore wrestling is. Not this deathmatch stuff you see today, but hardcore wrestling, hard-hitting wrestling. Mm-hmm. He encompassed to me, you know, you look up a brawl outside the ring, and I'll think of Terry Funk first. Before I think of a guy like Stone Cold Steve Austin. Terry Funk was so much more than just a hardcore guy, more than a brawler guy, a former NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. The guy could wrestle. His brother Dory Funk wrestled as well and trained. But Funk's been around for a long time and wrestled many guys. And there's a lot of people weighing in on it tonight. CZ, what do you think about the passing of Terry Funk, and what sticks out in your mind when you hear those words?
So I'm very saddened by his passing. Obviously, that it was a big blow, as big, if not bigger, than when we lost Scott Hall last year. In my opinion, I'll be honest. I have been running a guilty pleasure in watching early 2000s WCW lately, where the Funker was the commissioner of WCW, going to combat the newly reformed NWO that consisted of Bret Hart, Jeff Jarrett, Scott Steiner, and Kevin Nash. Funk brought in other legends like Arn Anderson, Paul Orndorff, and Larry Zbyszko to help combat the NWO. I've been watching that for the last week or so, really enjoying what they were doing. Match-wise, the first match that I thought of was not of Terry Funk per se, but of his other persona, Chainsaw Charlie, in the WWE. The dumpster match between him, Mick Foley, and the New Age Outlaws at WrestleMania 14. That is always one of my favorite memories of his, because his WWE run at that time was just so off the wall and enjoyable, in my opinion.
And it was great to see him get tag team gold on the biggest stage at WrestleMania. So he's forever immortalized in the annals of WrestleMania. We're joined also here on the Card Subject to Change podcast, powered by Low Pies Pizza, by Tim Regal. Regal's a friend of the show. Regal will be coming up later this week to review All In, which is Sunday. But tell me, Tim, when you hear the words Terry Funk, what comes to your mind? What matches stand out to you?
What comes into my mind most is the guy who could literally do it all. He could technically wrestle. He worked in Japan. He literally worked for every major promotion from TNA all the way down to, you know, every territory. Obviously, most known for being in Amarillo in the territory days, but was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Could brawl. I mean, like you said, one of the guys who basically helped bring hardcore wrestling to the mainstream. But then, as CZ said, coming back to Chainsaw Charlie as the commissioner in WCW, working the hardcore feud with Norman Smiley, he became the guy who could also be the old veteran doing the comedy matches.
Yep.
I think also one of the things that needs to be talked about with Terry, one of the first guys to have that crossover into the mainstream. I mean, the movies he made, Over the Top, one of my favorite movies of all time, Roadhouse.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
The infamous line of, "What am I supposed to do now? There's always Barber College." For me, it's obviously when I was a kid, my first exposure to Terry, right as I was getting into wrestling, right as I got into WWF, was when Terry exited. So like seeing him on the tape for like WrestleMania 2, and it wasn't until a couple years later, because that's when he went out and did movies, when he came back in '89 as a judge for the Steamboat Flair match.
Yes.
And then after the very famous angle, probably one of the greatest angles of all time, in my opinion, that goes down after the match, where Flair does the babyface turn, acknowledges Ricky Steamboat as his greatest opponent. Terry jumps in to congratulate him, keeps interrupting the promo, and then challenges Rick. And Rick's like, "Terry, you've been out in Hollywood for 5 years. We got a contenders list." And then Terry goes to shake his hand, pops him, and then lays the beat down on him and pile drivers him on a table at ringside, which in 1989 we didn't see that. You know, that was something as a 10-year-old I had never seen. And then that sparks the JTEX Corporation versus the Babyface Horseman that brings Muta to the United States. It's honestly one of my favorite angles of all time. And then as I got older, going back, finding the All Japan tapes, finding, you know, the old territory tapes. One of the things I will tell everyone to seek out, go back April 6th, 1981, Memphis, Tennessee, Terry Funk versus Jerry Lawler in an empty arena match. One of, like, years before The Rock and Mankind, obviously. But
sure.
Unseen at the time, something that was completely a Memphis original. It was absolutely beautiful match. But yeah, just a guy who could do it all and did it in a way that made everybody believe he was 100% legitimate.
You talk about Ric Flair and Terry Funk and Flair turning face and Funk doing his thing and attacking him. We also get that great classic Clash of Champions 9 I Quit match, which to this day many people consider that is Funk's best match, and it may be. I'm not going to sit here and argue with it, but that match is beautiful. If you've got a chance, go back and watch it. I remember you telling me about that before, the Memphis empty arena match with Funk, and I need to get my eyes on that for sure. But what run do you think of would his WWE run is Chainsaw Charlie, the ECW run, where he pretty much, you know, put them and kept them on the map, or that WCW run? What do you think was the most memorable of his Regal in the 90s?
I mean, literally, they're all memorable in their own way, but I think, like CZ said, and you said, you have to go with that ECW run. He helped really elevate ECW from just a regional promotion and led it into the pay-per-view era with just the big match after big match after big match. And you can see it in Beyond the Mat, what he goes through going in for that barely legal pay-per-view. And then I was like, as Paul Heyman's quote, "Thank Terry Funk for all he's done, for being unselfish in selfish times." Because Terry, you know, a guy who didn't have to do all the things that he did, but did them to help ECW, to help guys like Tommy Dreamer, like Sabu, like Shane Douglas. So yeah, I think in the '90s it is definitely that ECW run.
It's
I
funny.
agree. He
Go
put
ahead,
a lot
CC.
of people on the map with that run, including the company. I completely agree. I don't think you're wrong at all. I mean, like you said, though, all three of those, you look at the WCW run, the WWE run, all three of those were very successful for him and very memorable in their own ways.
It's funny you say that he was very unselfish in selfish times, Regal. I was reading something that somebody had eulogized online tonight. He kind of saw that the ending of the territories, he's seen it and jumped out ahead of it and had no problem going on to Saturday night's main event and jobbing to Hogan because he knew that it would get him exposure. It would get his name out there. So he's kind of credited for being able to foresee the territories ending and seeing the bigger picture. And that was what, WWF at the time was doing with their wrestling on, national TV.
Yeah, the WWE run of Terry, the WWF run for Terry, it's fairly short, but he worked a lot with Hulk Hogan on house shows. I know there is the match on Saturday's main event. There was a Maple Leaf Gardens match that I posted up on my Twitter. On my X. I hate that. It's on Twitter. I posted it tonight where it's him and Hogan just like doing some weird chain sequence, reversing each other like 4 times and going into the buckle. But Terry's ability to adapt to whatever environment he was in, I think that just is, like I said, doing everything. But yeah, had some of the great matches with Hulk Hogan in that career, and I always heard that the plan was for that to go longer and be bigger, but Terry left to go do the movies.
Hey, and you can't blame him. We got Roadhouse out of it, right? One of the all-time great movies. I mean, that's my favorite Funk appearance in a movie is Roadhouse. I mean, anytime that movie's on, you sit down and watch it, right? You're not flipping the channel, and it's a bonus when he's on screen.
I've got that movie on just about every format you could possibly think of.
I'm gonna ask CZ the question first, Regal. But what image of Funk sticks out in your head? Like when you think of Terry Funk, what's the image that comes to your mind? What will forever be embedded in your mind of Terry Funk?
That's a really tough question. Honestly, because I'm a born and bred WWE, WWF mark, for lack of better terms. Obviously, the image of him with the pantyhose over his head coming out with the chainsaw, that sticks out the most to me because that's where I knew him the most growing up throughout my history. But there's so much more to that. One thing that stands out, there's, the picture that I showed, I believe he has a branding iron in his hand. He's notorious for using branding irons. And in my watching of WCW recently, he took a flaming branding iron to Kevin Nash's stomach at one point. So I think those two images for me are what stand out the most.
Tim, how about you?
So CZ gave the WWE answer. I'm going to be the spark and give the spark answer on this one. For me, I think the image that whenever I think of Terry Funk is bandaged up with Cactus Jack at their Kawasaki Stadium match, the IWA Japan King of the Death match tournament, or as a lot of Americans would come to know it, ICP Stranglemania, which that Stranglemania tape gave Terry and Cactus kind of revitalized both of their careers. So I think that also needs to get thrown into the mix. The ICP that match from Kawasaki Stadium that is like I said, ICP picked up and made their first like dubbed over commentary wrestling video. But yeah, that image of him and Cactus together at Kawasaki Stadium is what I will always think of.
I'm gonna go
What
with.
about you, Nick?
I always think of him in those red and white and black striped diagonal stripe tights, the bandana, the receding hairline, and a 50-some-year-old man doing a moonsault onto two guys to the outside in ECW. When I think of Terry Funk, if it's not Roadhouse as a movie star, that's what I think of him doing, is coming back. We're all fans of independent wrestling here, and ECW was independent wrestling at that time. And you always ask, are there any stars coming into the show? And guys, Terry Funk was the star of that show. It wasn't Raven, it wasn't Sabu, it wasn't whoever at the time. It was Terry Funk, and for him to come in and at that age, and it was kind of kick-started the career resurrection for him, which led to the WWE run and the WCW run later. So I'll always think of him as the black and white and red tights doing the moonsault onto a couple of guys to the outside. That's my image of Terry Funk. That's what I'll always remember him as. You're listening here to the Card Subject Change podcast. We're eulogizing here Terry Funk, passed away at the age of 79 today. We're joined, of course, by the Wizard CZ and Tim Regal. We'll go around the room. Closing thoughts here, CZ. What could you recommend? Give me a match to watch that we haven't talked about yet of the Funker.
So we've touched on ECW. First match that I watched after I heard of his passing today was the Triple Threat match. I know we talked a little bit about that, but that's the first one that comes to mind because that's where I went. That's the first thing I went. It was Big Stevie Cool, Sandman, and the Funker going for a triple threat to face Raven. Excellent match. Just an excellent career all around, and I want to send our condolences to his friends and family who are mourning just like his fans the loss today.
Tim, I know you talked about that empty arena match in Memphis. You got another match out there for the fans that they can go look up and watch here later tonight?
The first, obviously, any of the ones we've mentioned, but the one that what we haven't mentioned, I'll say the first match that I watched when I found out, Terry Funk versus Bruiser Brody, 1981 All Japan. You can watch that, and you can watch any of the stuff with him and Dory feuding with Brody and Hanson in that era in All Japan.
I'm going to go with the one I watched most recently, and it was a few weeks back. I'm going to go with One Night Stand 06. It was Edge, Mick Foley, and Lita taking on Funk, Tommy Dreamer, and Beulah McGillicuddy. And I know by the end of that match, Funk and Foley were so wound in barbed wire that they had to be cut out with 10 snips after the match. And I'll always remember that. Matty Montcalm, he is watching on here as well tonight, big wrestling fan, and he notes December 7th of 82 versus Brody was a great match as well. He was going off what you said, Regal, of a match with Brody. So Matty's a big wrestling fan, knows his wrestling, and if you can find that match, December 7th of 82 against Bruiser Brody is what he's suggesting for the memory of Terry Funk. We're going to wrap things up here.
You mentioned barbed wire. I'll throw one more.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sabu, Terry Funk, Born to be Wired.
Yes.
You want to talk about guys getting cut out of barbed wire? Watch Sabu literally tape his arm back together.
That's not. I don't think that's on Peacock, is it?
No. I think you got to search that out through some other means. But
I think so too, for obvious reasons. But we here at the Card Subject Change want to again express our condolences to the Funk family. Terry Funk passing at the age of 79. On behalf of the Wizard CZ, I'd like to thank Tim Regal for joining us on such short notice. This has been the Card Subject Change podcast, powered by Lopez on the For Frequency's Sake Network.